Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take a bunch of interesting sources and really pull out the key stuff for you.
You the actionable insights, right, without getting totally bogged down.
Exactly. We know you, our listener, want those aha moments, that real understanding you can actually use quickly.
And today, we're diving into David Epstein's range, how generalists triumph in a specialized world. It tackles a big question, doesn't it?
It really does. Like, should we all be specializing so much? Or is having broader knowledge, the real advantage?
Epstein pulls examples from all over sports, music, science, business. It's all about the power of breadth.
Right. And our mission today is simple. Explore his ideas, sure, but mostly grab those golden nuggets for you. Actionable stuff.
Key statements, simple explanations, practical examples.
Yeah, and what you can actually do with this info. Starting now.
Because the book really pushes back on some common ideas about success, about starting early and focusing hard.
It really does. Okay, let's get into it. First up, this idea of the myth of the head start. That really grabbed me.
Yeah, it's a great place to start. Epstein contrasts these two very different stories.
Like Laszlo Polgar, raising his daughters specifically to be chess champions. Super intense, early specialization. Susan Polgar.
Exactly. And then on the other hand, you've got...
Roger Federer. You'd think, tennis legend, he must have been drilled from age 3, right?
But no. Apparently his mom, who was a tennis coach, deliberately didn't coach him too intensely early on.
His parents were apparently described as pulley. Is that right? Like holding him back a bit.
Yeah, encouraging him not to get too serious about tennis initially. And they felt his trying lots of different sports was actually essential later on.
Wow. So hyper-focused versus like a sampling period.
Which leads perfectly into this next idea Epstein brings up, kind versus wicked learning environments, from Klein and Kahneman's work.
Okay, break that down. What's a kind environment?
Think chess or golf. The rules are crystal clear. Patterns repeat. You get immediate, accurate feedback. You hit the ball. You see where it goes.
Makes sense. Practice works well there. You see the results.
Precisely. That's where early, focused practice really pays off.
But then there are these wicked environments, which sound, frankly, a lot more like most of our jobs and lives.
Exactly right. Wicked environments. The rules might be unclear or they change. Patterns are hard to spot, maybe don't even exist. And feedback, often delayed, ambiguous, or just plain wrong.
Like trying to predict the market or figure out office politics or launch something totally new.
Yeah, all wicked. And here's the kicker. Based on Robin Hogarth's work that Epstein highlights, what helps you in a kind environment can actually hurt you in a wicked one.
How so?
Because in wicked domains, your experience might just be teaching you the wrong things over and over. Hogarth's example of the typhoid diagnosing doctor is, well, chilling.
Oh, the tongue guy.
Right.
He thought he was brilliant at spotting it just by looking.
Because he was often right. But it turned out he was the carrier infecting his patients. His experience just reinforced a totally wrong and dangerous conclusion.
Yikes. Okay, so first big takeaway for you, the listener. Think about where you operate most. Is it more like chess or more like navigating fog?
Exactly. Are you in a kind domain where specialization shines? Or a wicked one where maybe a broader toolkit is better? Does your learning approach actually match the reality you face? Worth thinking about, isn't it?
Definitely. Okay, so building on that, Epstein talks a lot about the upside of broad experience and maybe delaying that super specialization.
He does. He points to Christopher Connolly's research on people who navigated career changes successfully.
And what did Connolly find?
The ones who adapted best. They tended to have broader training earlier on, and they consciously kept multiple career streams open. Connolly called it traveling an 8-lane highway, not a single track.
I like that, the 8-lane highway. It's about keeping options open, right?
Yeah.
Not getting stuck too early.
Right, and Epstein connects this to something else fascinating, the Flynn effect.
Oh yeah, the thing about IQ scores going up over generations.
Yes, but how they're going up is key here. Estonian researchers compared kids in the 1930s and 2006. The biggest jumps in understanding weren't just any words, but abstract concepts.
Like law, pledge, citizen, stuff like that.
Exactly. We're getting better generation by generation at abstract thinking, conceptual reasoning.
It's like our collective mental software got an upgrade.
Yeah.
And that changes things for learning and work, presumably.
Absolutely. Epstein brings in Alexander Lyria's amazing natural experiment from the Soviet Union back in the 30s.
Right, studying remote villagers whose lives were changing rapidly due to collectivization and education.
Yeah. Luria found their thinking was initially super practical, tied completely to direct experience. You give them a which one doesn't belong puzzle, say, 3 adults and a child?
They wouldn't necessarily pick the child out.
No, they might say the child belongs because he can help the adults work. It's functional, not categorical thinking.
Same with tools in a log, right?
Yeah.
Hammer, saw, hatchet, log.
Exactly. They wouldn't group the tools because, well, what good are tools without the log to use them on? It really shows the shift towards the abstract, classification-based thinking we mostly use now. Flynn called it putting on scientific spectacles.
We see the world in categories and systems now, but Flynn himself was a bit critical of how education uses this ability, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. He was disappointed that universities often push specialization so hard, even though our minds are capable of broader thinking. He did a study at a top school.
And found almost no link between GPA and a test of broad conceptual thinking.
Pretty much zero correlation. His takeaway was pretty blunt. Even the best universities aren't developing critical intelligence. Their education is too narrow. He argued, we need to train minds to connect ideas across fields.
So our brains are getting better at abstract thought, but our systems often push us down narrow paths anyway, which brings us to Fermi problems.
Yes. Great example. Those back-of-the-envelope calculation questions, like, estimate the number of piano tuners in Chicago.
Right, you don't need exact data, just reasonable assumptions and logic.
Exactly. And Epstein's point is, those Uzbek villagers Luria studied probably couldn't tackle that. But most of us can. Even without being piano experts, we have that broader conceptual toolkit. He calls it a conceptual Swiss Army knife.
Love that phrase. A conceptual Swiss Army knife, having lots of different mental tools for different jobs.
And in a world changing as fast as ours, a wicked world, that ability to connect ideas, to see patterns across contexts, is just invaluable. Routine stuff gets automated. The edge is in conceptual reasoning.
So another takeaway for you, listening. Actively build that Swiss Army knife. Explore stuff outside your lane. Try those Fermi problems. They're like mental push-ups for flexible thinking. Grasp the underlying principles.
Yeah, don't just learn facts, learn frameworks.
Okay, next up. Learning through mistakes. This feels wrong somehow. Epstein talks about desirable difficulties, making learning harder on purpose.
It sounds counterintuitive, I know, but the research he presents is pretty compelling. A bit of struggle, what he calls productive failure, seems to lead to much deeper, stickier learning.
Like that experiment with the monkeys learning picture lists. The ones who got hints did worse later.
Exactly. Nate Cornell's study. The monkeys who got lots of hints aced the training, but bombed the later tests. The researchers concluded training with hints did not produce any lasting learning. Too easy means it doesn't sink in.
Wow. So making it easy short-term actually undermines long-term learning. Our brains need to work a bit.
That seems to be the case. It ties into the idea of testing for learning. Just the act of trying to retrieve information from your memory, even if you struggle or get it wrong, strengthens that memory. It's not just assessment, it's a learning technique.
And the spacing effect, too. Learning over time is better than cramming.
Definitely. That Iowa State word list study is a classic example. People studied words, then recalled them. Some recalled immediately, others after a delay with a distracting math task.
And the distracted group did best later.
On a surprise pop quiz, yeah. That struggle, that forced retrieval after a delay, made the memory stronger long term. Cramming gives you fleeting familiarity, not lasting knowledge. Effortful recall is key.
Which brings us back to desirable difficulties. Things that make learning feel harder now, but pay off later.
Right. Like that study on calculus professors, the ones whose students struggled more initially, maybe even gave lower teacher ratings.
Their students actually did better in later, harder math courses.
Exactly. The profs who made it easy got good reviews, but their students weren't as well prepared down the line. It suggests we often prefer teaching that feels good in the moment, even if it's less effective long term.
That's a big one for us as learners. We might naturally avoid the struggle, but the struggle is where the real learning happens. Epstein also mentions the fade-out effect with some early education programs.
Yeah, programs that focus on closed skills, things easily learned through repetition that most kids pick up anyway. The initial head start often vanishes as peers naturally catch up. It's not a lasting advantage.
Okay, so actionable insights here. Don't fear the struggle. Embrace desirable difficulties. Test yourself actively. Space out your learning. Don't just reread. Try to recall. Mistakes aren't failures, they're data points. Short-term ease might actually be a warning sign for long-term retention.
Well put. Seek out the learning that makes you wrestle with the material a bit. That effort builds muscle.
All right, let's switch gears to analogical thinking. Epstein argues this is a massively important, maybe underrated, skill.
Hugely important. He uses Johannes Kepler as the prime example, trying to figure out planetary motion before Newton and gravity.
How did it even start?
Analogies. He compared planetary forces to things he did understand. Smells, heat, light, magnets, even boats moving in a river. He was borrowing structures from other domains to build a new understanding, famously saying, "Ye physicists, prick your ears."
For now, we are going to invade your territory.
Love it.
So, facing the unknown, look for parallels in the known, even if they seem totally unrelated.
Exactly. And Epstein, drawing on Dadre Gentner's work, distinguishes between surface analogies and deep ones.
Surface is just obvious similarity.
Right. Fixing a leaky pipe the same way you did before. Deep analogies are about seeing the underlying structure is the same, even if the surface details are wildly different.
Like the classic tumor and fortress problem, solving a medical problem using a military strategy analogy.
Precisely. The challenge is destroying a central target, tumor fortress, without harming the surroundings, tissue countryside. The solution in both cases involves converging forces from multiple directions simultaneously, recognizing that shared deep structure is the key.
That's powerful. Epstein also mentions the outside view for forecasting, using analogies to predict better.
Yes. Instead of just focusing on the specifics of your project, the inside view, look for similar past projects, the outside view. How did they turn out? He cites examples in finance and movies where this analogical approach led to much more accurate predictions.
And Gentner's ambiguous sorting task. That's a test of this ability.
Yeah, it measures how well people can group scenarios based on their underlying structural similarities, ignoring the surface details. It gets at that core skill of deep analogical thinking.
And Kepler, again, being willing to ditch his own model after years of work because of a tiny data mismatch, that speaks volumes about intellectual honesty.
Huge. He didn't fudge the data to fit his theory. He trusted the observation, even when it broke his beautiful model. So, takeaways on analogy. Actively practice it. When stuck, ask, what is this problem like in a totally different field? Look past the surface. And, like Kepler, be ready to abandon your pet theories if the evidence points elsewhere.
Okay, now let's talk about experimentation. Finding your path. This feels really relevant for anyone feeling, well, a bit stuck or unsure.
Absolutely. Epstein really stresses that finding your way is often messy, non-linear. Look at Vincent van Gogh.
Right. He tried being a teacher, a bookstore clerk, a missionary, all before finding painting relatively late.
And people around him, family, even his old boss told him he was nuts. You started too late. You are no artist.
It's a great reminder that it's rarely too late, and the path isn't always obvious from the start. And his approach to art was experimental too, wasn't it?
Totally. Painting outdoors in a storm, trying things out, even things that seemed crazy. That experimentation actually seemed to unlock his creativity. He even said painting turned out to be less difficult than I expected, maybe because he wasn't forcing it into a preset mold.
This connects to that study by Ulfer Malamud on the UK education system.
Yeah.
Scotland versus England and Wales.
Yes. Scottish university students had more time to sample subjects before specializing, unlike in England and Wales where they had to choose earlier.
Get the result.
The Scottish students, despite maybe having fewer specific skills right out of the gate, ended up in jobs that were a better match for them. Malamud concluded the benefits to increased match quality outweigh the greater loss in skills. Finding the right fit trumped early skill accumulation.
It's like dating versus marrying your high school sweetheart, right? More sampling leads to a better long-term match. Epstein calls it avoiding career divorce.
That's the idea. And then there's Stephen Levitt's coin flip study. People undecided about a big life change.
They flipped a coin. Heads, make the change. Tails, stick with the status quo.
And fascinatingly, the ones who got heads and made the change, especially changing jobs, reported being significantly happier months later. It challenges that winners never quit idea.
Sometimes quitting is winning, if it's the wrong path. Seth Godin says winners quit fast, and often when things aren't working.
Right. It's about knowing when to push through versus when to pivot. Very different from the old company man model. Today, adaptability and finding the right fit are crucial.
So the message here seems to be, embrace experimentation in your life and career. Try things. Sample widely. Don't see changing direction as failure. See it as learning. Become a scientist of yourself, as Romania Barra puts it.
Exactly. Test and learn, she says, not plan and implement. Flirt with your possible selves. Find low-cost ways to try things out.
Okay, finally, Epstein looks at how to actually cultivate range in a world pushing specialization.
Yeah, how do we swim against that tide? He emphasizes that deep expertise is good, but breadth is becoming a superpower. Think of Chrissy Wellington.
The Ironman champion. Started competitive cycling super late, right? Like 27.
Yeah, and then just dominated for years. Her late start didn't hold her back. Maybe her diverse background and passion for new things actually fueled her. Shows mastery doesn't always need that super early start.
And platforms like Incentive, where companies post tough problems and outsiders solve them.
Perfect example of lateral thinking. People from completely different fields bring fresh eyes. That lawyer solving a chemistry problem by thinking about tear gas. Classic outside perspective.
Outsiders aren't trapped by the standard thinking, the Einstellung effect, as Epstein calls it.
Exactly. They don't know the right way, so they're free to find a better way. Like John Davis using concrete vibrators for chocolate mousse or chewing gum for hair removal. Totally outside the box thinking. As Pedro Domingo said, knowledge can be a double-edged sword. It can blind you.
Don Swanson's work connecting different medical literatures using software, finding magnesium for migraines that way.
Another great example. And Jill Viles diagnosing her own rare genetic condition by connecting dots across bodybuilding photos and medical journals. Incredible personal story of interdisciplinary insight.
It really shows the power of the intersections. And Gunpei Yokoi at Nintendo, lateral thinking with withered technology.
Love that phrase. Using older, cheaper tech in brilliant new ways. The Ultra Hand toy. The Game Boy, inspired by a bored commuter playing with a calculator. Yokoi cared more about fun gameplay than bleeding-edge specs.
Which brings us to Jayshree Seth at 3M, describing herself as T-shaped.
Right. Broad knowledge across the top, the T-bar, combined with deep expertise in one area, the STEM. She uses her breadth to ask the deep specialists, I-shaped people, fundamental questions, like an investigative journalist putting pieces together.
And that research suggesting individual creators with broad experience, the supermen, can sometimes out-innovate teams, the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, think Miyazaki or Gaiman, drawing on such diverse wells. Epstein even mentions pest-shaped people, deep expertise in two areas. And the advice to hire people with varied interests and hobbies. Like Lin-Manuel Miranda, I have a lot of apps open in my brain right now.
Great quote. Okay, final batch of actionable thoughts. Actively grow your range. Explore widely. Connect ideas. Look for those withered technologies, existing stuff you can repurpose. Aim to be T-shaped, maybe even key-shaped. Value breadth as much as depth.
Yeah, the overall message is really empowering, I think. If you felt like your path wasn't narrow enough, maybe that's actually your strength. That range, that ability to connect dots, it's incredibly valuable, especially now.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought to leave you with, building on all this. As automation takes over more routine specialized tasks, doesn't that make our uniquely human ability to integrate knowledge, to think creatively across domains, exponentially more valuable? Something to think about. What's one small step you can take this week to broaden your range, even just a little? Thanks for diving deep with us.